Welcome back. This is World Talks on TVP World. I'm Anna Kalczyńska. Western Ukraine, so far considered relatively safe, has been under heavy attacks, with Russian strikes targeting civilian infrastructure for 3 consecutive nights. It's obvious now, also to the White House apparently, that the strategy of the Kremlin has evolved into continuous terror against the Ukrainians. So how much can the society endure? Perhaps we will learn something new on Monday with Keith Kellogg with his visit to Kiev and Donald Trump to give an important announcement. But so far, let's analyze the latest news around Ukraine together with Milan Lelich, political observer, RBC-UKRAINE, who joins me now on the show. Good morning, and thank you for being with us on TVP World.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
So, what is the President Zelensky's main strategy in dealing with Donald Trump now, given the unpredictability of U.S. support?
Well, I think that our government has learned its lessons after the infamous Oval Office scandal. So it's very obvious how the very attitude and approach in communicating with the Trump's administration have changed, as well as basically I see these changes also. They can also be noticed in Europe as well. We all learned as of now that you should never try to, criticize Donald Trump or be not that much thankful as Donald Trump wishes everyone to be. So I think that this strategy has been fruitful as of now, and we see also a lot of Western media during several days, they have underlined that Donald Trump is really changing his attitude towards the Russian aggression against Ukraine. I think this is partly because of this change in our way of doing things, and mostly I think this is because Russia hasn't changed anything, and Russia's many mistakes made by Putin. And Donald Trump very, very slowly, much slower than we would like him to, but very slowly he starts to understand what's really going on, that Russia doesn't want peace. And we have really more or less optimistic expectations of Monday of that of Keith Kellogg visit and Donald Trump's speech on Russia that you've announced just. So I think we'll see. But again, with Donald Trump, you can never be sure in anything. So, right. But still, we hope that from words he'll get to some real things that need to be done.
Right. So you spoke of Vladimir Putin committing mistakes. Do you think he took for granted Donald Trump's relation? And do you believe that Trump's recent statement about Russia signal a real policy shift? Or this is more like a stick pointed towards Moscow and something more of a political theater? What is to be expected as of Monday?
You're 100% right. Vladimir Putin and their whole government, they consider that this favorability by Trump towards them is just for granted, really, that it will be eternal, that Trump likes Putin because he is such a strong man and all this stuff, that he respects Putin, but he doesn't understand Ukraine. He hates Zelenskyy. Ukraine has caused a lot of trouble during Trump's political biography, during his first term, and all this stuff. So I think in Kremlin, they thought in Kremlin that perhaps the situation will be as it is. So no compromises at all should be made, because Trump is more or less on their side. So they decided to push for their maximum goals. And this perhaps was a mistake, because but this reflects the overall way of Russian foreign policy. It used to be done for decades or centuries. So everything less than a full-scale victory, 100% victory, is a defeat. So if we want to occupy say, as of now, like several regions of Ukraine, they should be ours. No compromise in that regard. And this was definitely a mistake because, okay, Trump was more or less favorable towards Putin and paid him lip service and all this stuff, but still, it's sure he really did expect some compromises from Russia as well. But what he sees, and I think what his advisors keep telling him, that look, no compromises. 2 rounds of talks in Istanbul led to no political shifts at all. Yeah, we had the POWs exchanges, but we had them even before that. So no major consultations in Istanbul need to be done to have these changes. But in political dimension, absolutely nothing happened. And Trump started to understand this, but I think that there will be, on Monday, you asked about Monday, there will be some threats. As of now, not real things, but threats. But I think that maybe something can be done also with U.S. aid to Ukraine. We hope for some announcement or some movement in that direction.
So let's talk about resilience. How prepared is Ukraine to continue the war without full-scale U.S. support, militarily, economically, and psychologically?
Well, the U.S. support is badly needed, and as of now, despite all the efforts done by the European nations, still they cannot replace, they cannot fully replace the U.S. aid, and they openly admit this. For example, like missiles to Patriot systems and all this stuff, this is just not produced in Europe. So without the U.S. aid in some middle term and especially long-term perspective, if to imagine the worst-case scenario that we are deprived of this aid, then our prospects will look very grim. But again, I think it will not happen, taking into account all the latest shifts in Trump's attitude. I don't think it will happen. As for the civilian population and our resilience, yeah, as a resident of Kiev, and I've been here since day one, I can say that, yes, during several last weeks, the situation has become more difficult, even by our means. In our estimation, in our assessment, we got used to a lot of things. But still, we see that Russians, as of now, are more or less capable to maintain really heavy attacks by Shahed drones. So we used to talk about scores of Shahed drones. Now we are talking about hundreds per night. So the very last night was the first in 2 months since the 8th of May, where the Russians did not commit any major attack on our cities by any major night attack on our cities by Shahed drones. So 2 months, every consecutive night, there was a major attack, and they have increased in their amount this week, last week, heavily. If it is not Kiev, then this is Lviv. If not Lviv, then Kharkiv. If not Kharkiv, then Lutsk or Chernivtsi or any other cities in hundreds kilometers away from the front line. So still we manage, and everything functions perfectly. I mean the city services and all the businesses and all the cafes and theaters and everything are open. And I also do not see that there are less people, for example, in Kyiv, because one could think that maybe some families, especially with little kids, will decide to move somewhere away from Kyiv. But again, we see that Lutsk is now a safe city. Lviv, even Chernivtsi, that has suffered relatively less attacks during all the 3+ years, it is not safe. There are dead people. Several people have died this week after another attack. A lot of people are wounded. So no safe place to move to in Ukraine, but still we are resilient. If we have this US aid, I think that we'll absolutely be able to keep on fighting. Absolutely.
Right. The question remains, how much longer can Ukraine maintain its current level of resistance? But how do you cope? How does that affect your life? Are you reaching the shelter anytime you hear an alarm bomb? How is the life organized for you?
Well, personally, I may be not a good example, and I ask everyone not to follow my example because I almost never go to the shelters. This is my own choice, and this is also the choice of many people, and this is also because of my professional duties. For example, during the night when there is a heavy attack, I am being a deputy editor-in-chief of our news agency. I have to look after our news line so that everything is correct and all this stuff. So to coordinate the editors of the news line. So I don't have very many opportunities to hide somewhere in the shelter, for example. Surely, but near my apartment, near my residential area, there is another Shahed trace. So quite often they move in my direction. So I can, with an open window, it's warm here in Kyiv. So with my open window, I hear all the sounds. Sure, if I hear that the Shahed is really approaching, maybe several hundred meters away, I try to hide somewhere in the bathroom. But if it's not the case, I hear everything. I understand. Basically, a lot of Ukrainians. It may sound weird, I think, for almost any resident, for example, of the European Union, but almost every Ukrainian civilians during these 3+ years has already learned how to distinguish between different thoughts, different kinds of weaponry, and what is the sound. Is this Shahed flying, or is this our air defense, or is this the cruise missile or ballistic missile or something? So and people behave the way they understand what's going on, like, oh, Shahed is coming here, I'd better hide in the bathroom. No, this Shahed flies quite far away, maybe like a kilometer or a couple of kilometers, so perhaps no big need to hide somewhere. This is the way that a lot of Ukrainians do, but again, each and every night you can see tons of images from our metro stations that are absolutely full with a lot of people. We are talking about thousands and thousands of people, perhaps. We have a lot of metro station in Kyiv, so maybe even tens of thousands of people who spend their night, they prepare, they take their kids, their pets and all this stuff, so they prefer to spend their nights there just in case, and I think this is actually a good example of behavior.
Well, as history teaches us, much can be endured providing there's hope, and in this respect, time is an important factor. So, despite Russia's growing losses, its offensive in Donetsk and Sumy continues. How sustainable is this approach for the Kremlin, you think? How long?
Well, as of now, unfortunately, I've heard a lot of forecasts from both our Ukrainian officials and from the Western diplomats I communicate with a lot. So there were a lot of off-the-record forecasts that perhaps in mid-autumn or something like October, September, November, Putin will understand that it should be over because his economy falls apart and no resources and all this stuff. I used to hear it back in March and April. So like half a year more and it may be all over, at least more or less stable ceasefire, but I don't hear it anymore, neither from the Western guys, Western diplomats, nor from our officials, because unfortunately the Russian economy has a lot of problems. It does, but as of now and in the coming months, it will definitely not fall apart, unfortunately for everyone. And again, Putin understands that he still has enough resources, enough shells, enough money, enough cannon fodder, and all this stuff. So he can go on and on and on. Perhaps by the end of this year, maybe by next spring, who knows? I've heard so many forecasts that Russia would not be able to maintain its war in 2023, in 2024, now 2025, but it still is able to keep waging the war. So I'm very cautious with any forecasts, but the day will come and it will be over. I think that the solution to this situation is in the hands of Donald Trump.
And we are cautiously optimistic ahead of tomorrow, ahead of Monday's announcement by Donald Trump on Russia, as he says. So we are just awaiting his words. Thank you so much, Milan Lelich, political observer, RBC Ukraine. Thank you for joining us, sir, and have a good day. Waiting for tomorrow. Hopefully, optimistic news.
Thank you. Bye.
And thank you for watching World Talks. Thank you so much for staying with TVP World. I'm Anna Kalczynska. See you soon.